That's such an exciting time when you start to see them developing. Guten gardening, everybody. Well, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to be out here in the garden. We just got back from our trip to Germany, and today I've got to get out here and harvest. There are a lot of vegetables out here that weren't ready when we left that are definitely ready now, including some of these beautiful pole beans, which I might add might be changing my mind in terms of favorite taste, because these are phenomenal. But we've got pole beans, squash, cabbage, all kinds of things to harvest today. So let's go ahead and get started. I think the place I want to start most is right here with my cabbage. And you can see the outside leaves of this cabbage are not looking good at all. But as soon as I remove those outer leaves, we get down into some amazing looking cabbage. Take a look at these heads. I just pull off those outer layers and we've got delicious cabbage, and there's a whole bunch of them. We got about a dozen plants here. And I would argue this is a pretty good size for a head of cabbage, organic cabbage at that. You know, one of the things I like so much about cabbage is it's pretty easy to store even in the fridge for up to a couple of months. So actually this year we've grown more cabbage, I think, than we've grown in previous years. We've been eating it a lot more. Our preferred method actually is to stir fry it with some of the other vegetables in the garden, but this stuff looks amazing. Let's go ahead and harvest some more. Well, I got interrupted from my harvest because we got a little friend over here. I'll zoom in, so if I get much closer, I can't really say this is a garden friend. It's definitely more of a garden pest, those rabbits. You know, in my opinion, one of the things that's really cool about cabbage is that for a good bit of the season, you know, you come in, you check on the ball, it doesn't seem to be progressing all that much, and then all of a sudden, I mean, we went away for what, about 12 days, and by the time we came back, it was good to go, good to harvest. So, you know, it's kind of like broccoli in that regard. There you go, look at that, that's beautiful. Stunning cabbage here. I'm gonna show you some of my purple cabbage, and I wanna get your opinion about the purple cabbage. I'll harvest this beauty later, because it's something that we've noticed. I almost didn't grow any purple cabbage at all this year for the specific purpose. I mean, I love purple vegetables. There's no doubt in my mind about the anthocyanins in them and the benefits, but we just never get as good of a size out of this cabbage as we do the green. So, I mean, that's beautiful, but let me show you a comparison. All right, you see a little side-by-side comparison here. I mean, there's really no comparison. It's maybe half the size as the green one. You know, we've talked about this a good bit in the past, but this is one of those side-by-side comparisons that helps us to determine what we're going to grow in, you know, in the following seasons. If I can get twice the size out of these, unless the nutritional benefits are there, I'm gonna have to go with something I can grow more of or grow bigger. I mean, I think the taste is fairly comparable. What do you think? The taste between the purple and just the traditional cabbage. What are your thoughts? Which one's better? You know, two areas where we've been really fortunate this year, I'll say. One, we don't see a lot of slugs when it comes to cabbage, and I know that's a struggle for a lot of people. But two, with our pole beans here, I see a couple of plants that look like they didn't make it, but for the most part, they're really healthy. And the Japanese beetles this year, I saw 5 or 6 maybe. We were just really fortunate with the Japanese beetles, you know, not having to deal with them, because when they come along, they love beans. They will eat the leaves off those so fast. What was your experience with Japanese beetles like this year? I know one thing's for sure, we have a ton, these are Kentucky blue pole beans. We have a ton of these pole beans here, and it looks like there's a whole bunch of smaller ones on here, so I gotta get to harvesting. The beans take a little while to harvest, but in my mind, they're well worth the time. And the simple trellises that we have in here, just a couple of U-posts and some little bit of fencing that we had left over from some other fencing that we did, are perfect little trellises for these pole beans. They're easy access to the beans. You know, one thing we'd love to do is some cattle panel. We've talked about that too. It's not something that we really have the ability to do right now in terms of transport, but I think in the near future, maybe we'll try a little bit of overarching cattle panel here. All right, I'm gonna show you how much I harvest here in a second. Hey, if you have a green stalk garden, I'm gonna give you a little gardening hack here really quickly. This is the top of the green stock garden. This is where you water and it drips down throughout the rest of the system. But this also doubles really well as something that you can collect some of your harvest in. So if the top of the green stalk, that top tier, isn't overly tall, at this point I've got spinach that's about this tall, so I can remove this and put it back on pretty easily. I can use this as something to harvest in while I'm out here. Anyway, little garden hack. There, you see what I mean? That's a bunch, and I still got a ton of these beans left underneath here to harvest. Look at that, so many green beans. I'm so excited. Well, that is a nice pile of pole beans right there. That was a lot of fun to pick, you know, all the leaves sticking to me and everything else, but let's go ahead and head around and get some beets. Now the raised bed behind me has two things in it. We've got some fall potatoes. They're Adirondack blue potatoes that I planted a couple weeks ago. Those are Wood Prairie Family Farm seed potatoes. And I've got some beets that have been growing in here all season long. Now I did multi-sow the beets in here and we've already harvested a couple, but some of them definitely performed better than others. This still isn't all that massive though. And to be honest with you, my beets this year have been just okay. And you know, maybe it's a little bit inconsistent watering because we've been gone so much. I would say especially in comparison to the Hickory Croft farm beets, although some of these aren't so bad. We'll get a couple of these out of here. We actually just did a little roast the other night. It's one of my favorite ways to eat beets. And we put in the oven at 400 degrees, a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, a little bit of garlic in there with it. But I sliced up beets, I sliced up kohlrabi from our compost garden, and I also added some green peppers or some banana peppers, and it was phenomenal. So good as a flavor combination if you want to give something like that a try. It sounds like they're doing something back here in the marshes. That's the sound. I think there's some invasive tree species they're probably digging up. That just started. So you're gonna hear a little bit of beeping as we get through this harvest. Now I actually talked about my summer squash coming to an end of their growing season. We still got a bunch more out here. And that's one of the things you probably know about summer squash. If the plants are healthy, you know, if they don't get taken down by powdery mildew or pests, they're gonna produce for a long period of time. But there are so many squash bugs on here right now. You can see they're all underneath here. There's so many squash bugs on here. They cover the plant, and the best way we found to deal with the squash bugs in the past is just to go in and squash them, literally just squish them. But once they come and take over, you know, the life cycle of these plants is basically done anyway. You know, all jokes aside, where people talk about having excess summer squash, something like this white patty pan, white bush patty pan squash is absolutely stunning. But somebody said to me recently that they had been given something like that and they weren't 100% sure how best to prepare the patty pan squash. And my response was just cut it up into pieces, just like you would a normal squash. Cook it in the oven, steam it. But I actually thought it'd be really nice to maybe get some feedback from our community and say, how do you like preparing, if you've grown patty pan squash before, how do you like preparing it? What's the best method? And then maybe I can pass this on to that individual. I'm gonna add these to the harvest. All right, I'm gonna walk over here and show you something I haven't shown anybody yet this season in the garden. So we're at the back of the house, right beside our golden raspberries. And you can see a whole bunch. We got a couple of broccoli in here, but a whole bunch of cauliflower. And when we got back from our trip, we saw these for the first time, the beginnings of the cauliflower heads. That's such an exciting time when you start to see them developing. They get a little bit bigger, and this is a shaded area, so that's really nice. But they get a little bit bigger, I'm gonna start wrapping the leaves over top. Now, if you've ever grown cauliflower or broccoli, you can't tell me the moment when you come out and you start to see the head forming isn't one of the most exciting moments in the garden. Of course, all this dead looking stuff is also really exciting because these are potatoes, and you know what that means. We're about to be harvesting some potatoes out of this bed. But first, I didn't plant very many tomatoes this year. And honestly, this was just a random heirloom tomato. I'm not even sure what kind, but we've got a couple of really nice ones off of here. We have so many tomatoes. This looks like our Amish paste here. We had so many tomatoes inside. I didn't want to take up too much garden space with tomatoes, but I still love getting some garden candy out of here. We had a couple of volunteer tomatoes that I let come up. And I've said this before, when they're ripe and I'm doing a harvest, you're never gonna see me harvest without a little taste of that garden candy. Oh, it's so good. Next door to that is that that zucchini that I harvested so many off of, maybe 6 or 7 off of, massive zucchini earlier. And of course, 12 days away from zucchini means massive, massive zucchini. Some zucchini bread in our future. That'll definitely have to happen. Oh, look at the size of this one. Yeah, these are huge. So I tell you what, in terms of food production, you want a plant that's going to give you a ton of food. You got to go for these zucchini. Wow. All right, I'm going to get these over to our main harvest. If we come around to the patio garden, we've also got some of the patty pan squash here growing in containers. This kohlrabi is actually looking like a pretty good size. Might let it go a little bit farther. I'm gonna harvest this patty pan as well. And I've got to get some more of these banana peppers off of here. We've got so many peppers on this, well, these couple of plants. I'm gonna harvest these and add them to our pile. I meant to show you this before I headed around the front, but you see all these plants dying back? You got it, that's more potatoes. Hey, we got Sharpo Mira and Baltic Rose, 2 of our favorite varieties in this bed, and we're gonna be harvesting that really soon. You see some beautiful California Wonders, and our jalapenos are looking pretty good. I actually had a red one on here. Wow, these are loaded down. I like to let these go all the way red, you know, ripen up the whole way. This one's starting to turn. See if I can get a little bit of additional heat. I want to show you one of the side effects of going away. This is in our green stalk out front. I've actually got some potatoes planted in here in the empty spots, but you can see some of the leaves didn't make it. However, if I look up top, you can actually hopefully see, I can see the beets that are developing in here quite nicely, and some ones that are newer, some that I planted right before we left. Yeah, so the beets that are in here are actually looking pretty great. I don't know how easily you can see it because it's kind of dark. Here's a good image of one of them. So here in our green stalk, our beets are looking really nice. And our sweet potatoes in this front yard space, our new front yard space, are covering everything. So actually this is a wonderful, wonderful sight to behold. And some of the fall potatoes that I planted in amongst these sweet potatoes are also looking pretty good. Well, that harvest was so much fun. Did you see all that food that I just got out of our garden here in late August? And there's plenty more for us to harvest. Tons of potato harvests coming your way. Hopefully some good sweet potato harvests as well. I'm super excited about all of that. And it was so much fun to get out here and harvest in the garden with you. Hey, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, you're with us, you are good to grow.